Hello, everyone. My name is Sierra Jones, and I am a student at Alabama A&M University taking the CME 720 course. My case study is entitled Real Math, Real Life, Student Interest as a Bridge to Algebraic Reasoning. So let me start with a quick scenario. Imagine you're in middle school again. You've been handed a worksheet filled with numbers, symbols, and abstract rules, and nothing about it connects to your life. Now imagine this instead. You're solving a math problem based on your favorite sport, your latest TikTok video, or how much it costs to get your nails done. Suddenly, math isn't just numbers. It's real. It's you. That's the heart of this case study. This presentation explores how bringing students' interest into algebra class uses their real world experience as a foundation, can help them move from just doing math to truly understanding it. It's not just about encouragement, it's about transformation. So here you'll find my table of contents of the flow of this presentation. Let's talk about what this study set out to explore. As its core, I wanted to know, how do real-world interest-based tasks help students think more deeply in algebra? We know middle schoolers can feel disconnected from their lives, but when tasks are built around things they care about, like social media, sports, beauty services, or food, something shifts. They don't just participate more, they reason more, they engage differently. So the main research question became, how do real world interest based tasks support eighth grade students' progression through Kaput's aspect of algebraic reasoning and the solo stages in their understanding of functions? I created two sub questions. How do students demonstrate growth in generalizing arithmetic, developing functional thinking, and modeling? And the second one was, how do these tasks support movement through the solo taxonomy from surface level understanding to deeper abstract thinking? So let's talk about the frameworks. They're designed, that's how I designed the task in this study, and more importantly, how I measured students' thinking in a way that goes far beyond right or wrong answers. This study is grounded in two frameworks that gave me a clear lens to both build learning experiences and track students' growth. Kaput's conceptual framework and the solo taxonomy. Let's start with Kaput's framework. It outlines the what of algebraic reasoning. It identifies three key strands that help us understand the progression from early thinking to more complex mathematical understanding. So the first one is generalizing arithmetic. This is where students notice patterns and create rules. Think about when a student says every time the number goes up by 1, the answer goes up by 2. That's the beginning of algebra. The second one is developing functional thinking. Here, students begin to see relationships between quantities. They're not just following steps, they're asking, if I change this, what happens to that? This is where input-output tables, graphs, and functions come into play. The third one is modeling with algebraic structures. This is a big one. Students start building equations to represent real situations. They can manipulate variables, explain their reasoning, and even question the limitations of the model. This is where algebra starts to feel alive and useful. But knowing what kind of reasoning students are doing isn't enough. We also have to understand how deeply their thinking is. That's where the solo taxonomy comes in. Solo stands for the structure of the observed learning outcomes, and it gives us a staircase to climb as students move from shallow to deep understanding. So we have the different stages. We start at the pre-structural level. A student might not know where to begin here. As they move into the unistructural level, they know one relevant piece, maybe just like I'll add 2 to that. In the multistructural, that means they know a few pieces but haven't quite made the connection yet. As they move to relational, it's when everything clicks. They can explain how and why those pieces fit together. And finally, at the extended abstract level, students can take what they've learned, apply it to new situations, critique models, or even propose a better way. When you combine these two frameworks, I know I wasn't just assessing the answers, I was actually watching how students were constructing meaning, how their thinking evolved as the math became more real and more relevant to them. This study used the Missouri Learning Standard 8.F.A that geared towards students learning about functions. The table presented in this rubric is to align students with the growth they experience over the pretest, the task, and the post-test. So as you look at this framework, you'll identify some indicators from students' work as they transition from different levels. This study wasn't about numbers on a spreadsheet, though. It was about 4 real students in Kansas City, each with their own story, their own interests, and their own math identity. I used a qualitative case study approach to follow their thinking as it unfolded over the course of 3 days. Their interest-based algebra tasks were developed. There weren't generic worksheets, they were designed to feel familiar and personal. Before we began, students took a short survey to share what they were interested in. I discovered that students like basketball, TikTok, nails, snacks, and music. That survey didn't just inform my planning, it became the foundation of how I introduced these concepts in math. And what I found was powerful. Here's what the task looked like. So, task 1, it was the guess the rule. In that task, students started by identifying arithmetic patterns and creating rules using input-output tables. Think like multiply by 3 or add 2 and double it. This introduced generalization in a structured, accessible way. Task number 2 was all about the functions. Is it really a function? We moved into functional thinking using relatable context. Are shoe sizes and heights a function? How about TikTok views and likes? Students made predictions, drew diagrams, and justified their reasoning. And we ended off with task 3, model it. Finally, students were creating and solving real-world equations based on their interest. We had interests such as hairstyles and nails, as well as going to a snack stand at a basketball game, and how students were able to purchase water bottles versus sports drinks. Students completed a pre and post test, engaged in small group discussion, reflected in writing, and participated in Think Alouds. Every piece of evidence they produced was analyzed using a rubric aligned to Kaput's standards of algebraic reasoning and the Solow taxonomy levels. This is what you see here on the screen. The taxonomy levels was to be able to track not just what they did, but how deeply they were thinking. Each task wasn't necessarily harder, but it was deeper. It invited students to move from noticing patterns to reasoning about relationships, to modeling situations they could actually imagine themselves in. That was the goal. Not to just assess students, whether students could do algebra, but to create opportunities for them to understand why algebra matters and how it already lives in the world around them. This study revealed that the real-world interest-based tasks can meaningfully support students' algebraic reasoning, but only when paired with intentional scaffolding and opportunities for reflection. So in this table here, you will see how students A through D move throughout the improvements from Solow taxonomy as well as Kaput strands. So students A and B made the most conceptual growth. Student A entered strong and progressed to the extended abstract reasoning, having all 3 of Kaput's strands, generalization, functional thinking, and modeling executed. Student B grew steadily from procedural steps to early abstract thinking, fueled by relevant tasks and structured support. Students C and D were procedurally accurate. They struggled to connect ideas or explain reasoning. They stayed within Kaput strand 2 and mostly at the multi-structural and relational stages of Solow. Their growth reminds us that doing math is not the same as understanding the math. A key takeaway in my findings was interest drives engagement, but engagement alone doesn't lead to deep thinking. It's the combination of relevance, reflection, and reasoning structure guided by frameworks like Kaputs and Solos that actually help students shift from surface level reasoning and responses to actually making connections and understandings. Here are some of the student work from different tasks, and you can see how some students were gradually leaving things blank, as well as some were beginning to explain things a little more. So at the end of each lesson, I asked students to reflect. Did anything about these tasks help you understand the math better? Here's what they told me. In this table, you will see a snippet of some of the student responses. It was nice to have a word problem about nails, which taps into their interest. The TikTok and food examples helped me understand. I knew more about math problems because it talked about basketball. These weren't rehearsed or prompted, they were authentic, off the cuff responses, and they tell us something powerful. These weren't just math problems. These were mirrors of reflection of students' lives, identities, and interests. When students see themselves in math classes, they don't just engage more, they begin to believe that they can belong there. They ask better questions, they persist longer, and most importantly, they begin to think more deeply because the work finally feels like it's theirs. This is more than motivation, it's connection, and that's where real learning starts. So, what I actually learned, of course, was that interest driving drives engagement, but reflection drives depth. Kaput and Solo are powerful tools for tracking and supporting reasoning. And lastly, short interventions can yield real results. If you're purposeful and personal about the student, then scaffolding can take place even more effectively. Of course, like any study, this one had its limits. It focused on just 4 students, a small but deeply examined group. It spanned only for 3 days, which meant we saw a snapshot, not the full journey for our students. And without the one-to-one technology access, students couldn't independently explore digital tools like Desmos. We had to model everything from the front of the classroom and demonstrate it from that one screen. But even with these constraints, the impact was clear. When math was rooted in students' lives and their interests, then things started to shift for them. Their responding deepened and their confidence grew. So, looking ahead at future research, I'd be interested to build on this work in 3 ways. One is expanding to full unit applications to see how interest based algebra tasks support learning over time. Number 2 would be designing professional development that help teachers create tasks like these and align them to developmental frameworks. And last, number 3, studying how rubrics like Solo and Kaput can guide not just student growth, but teachers' decisions, classroom conversations, and feedback loops. Because when we combine interest, structure, and purpose, we don't just teach math, we change how students experience it. So, this study was a powerful reminder that math isn't just neutral, it either includes or excludes. And in many classrooms, students don't see themselves in the content. They follow steps, they memorize procedures, but they don't always feel invited to understand the why behind the math or how it connects to their world. But when we embed students' identities into the learning, when the problems reflect their interests, their cultures, their lived experiences, we give students more than engagement. We give them agency. We give them a reason to actually care. We show them that algebra isn't just for someone else, it's a tool that they can use to make sense of the world around them. This work isn't about making math fun or trendy, it's about making it relatable. It's about designing learning experiences that reflect who our students are so that they can see what they're capable of becoming. And if we as educators continue to build these bridges between real life and real learning, we won't just teach math, we'll help students own it. Thank you all for listening to my presentation.